Hello and welcome to Indus News. Live from Islamabad, I'm Naila Shuja and these are the headlines. India has registered the world's highest cases and its record deaths in a day. The country has logged more than 412,000 infections and nearly 4,000 deaths overnight. Meanwhile, Pakistan has registered 108 deaths and over 4,100 cases in the past 24 hours. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 3.2 million lives and infected over 154 million people. Britain has sent 2 Royal Navy ships to Channel Island of Jersey following threats of a French blockade of its main port. A Downing Street spokesperson said British Prime Minister Johnson has stressed the urgent need for de-escalation in tensions. Johnson pledged his unwavering support for Jersey, saying any blockade by French boats would be unjustified. Israeli troops have shot dead a 16-year-old Palestinian boy during clashes in the occupied West Bank's Nablus city. Meanwhile, the Red Crescent said Israeli troops have also injured 4 Palestinians during a protest in East Jerusalem. The Palestinians are protesting against forceful evictions from the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood in East occupied Jerusalem. Syria says Israel has carried out another airstrike on the southern governorate of Kenitria. The Syrian state media said no damage has been reported in the Israeli aggression. The attack comes a day after Syrian army said its air defenses downed several Israeli missiles on the port city of Latakia. For more news and details, stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back. India has registered the world's highest daily cases since the pandemic began. The country has logged more than 412,000 infections and nearly 4,000 deaths overnight. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 3.2 million lives and infected over 154 million people. More in this report. Perilously low oxygen supplies, non-stop operating crematoriums, and dying hope doesn't even begin to describe the COVID chaos in India. New Delhi is facing growing pressure to impose a nationwide lockdown to stem the devastating surge. Despite resources pouring in from across the globe, medical workers and local officials are still reporting the shortages, raising questions even among foreign donors of where the aid is going. Some of India's neighboring countries such as Nepal, Thailand, and Laos are also seeing a huge spike in case numbers, prompting new lockdowns and travel bans. Meanwhile, the principal scientific advisor to the Indian government has warned that the third wave of the COVID-19 pandemic is inevitable.
A phase 3 is inevitable, given the high levels of circulating virus, but it's not clear on what time scale this phase 3 will occur. Hopefully, incrementally, but we should prepare for new waves.
The U.S. has approved the voluntary departure of non-emergency government employees from India because of a surge in COVID-19 cases. The Biden administration also announced support for easing patent rules to allow for a wider production of vaccines. Canada has approved the use of the Pfizer vaccine in children aged 12 years and up, becoming the first nation to do so. Meanwhile, Australia's New South Wales state has tightened restrictions after a second local case of COVID-19 was identified.
So essentially, for 5 o'clock today, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we ask that nobody welcome more than 20 people into your home. We know that transmission in the family home is a high risk. And I appreciate that it's Mother's Day, but we also appreciate that 20 people within the home is manageable for people to celebrate that important day.
Researchers in Norway and Denmark say they have more evidence that the AstraZeneca vaccine might raise the risk of unusual blood clots. A new report indicates that the Pfizer jab can protect people against worrying variants first identified in South Africa and the UK, while Moderna says its booster shot revs up an immune response against South African and Brazilian variants. Pakistan has reported 108 fatalities from coronavirus in the last 24 hours. The death toll has crossed 18,500. The health ministry says over 4,100 people tested positive for the virus overnight. Pakistan has reported 845,000 infections since the pandemic began. Health officials say there are currently more than 84,000 active cases in the country. They say more than 743,000 people have recovered so far. Meanwhile, authorities say more than 3 million vaccines have been administered in Pakistan. In Pakistan, security forces have killed 2 terrorists in an operation in the North Waziristan district of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. The military's media wing said the security forces carried out the operation on the reported presence of terrorists. It added that Captain Fahim and 2 other soldiers were martyred in the exchange of fire. Britain has sent 2 Royal Navy ships to Channel Island of Jersey amid concerns of a French blockade of its main port. Paris has threatened to cut off electricity to the island, which began issuing licenses to French boats under a new system last week. Britain's Ministry of Defense says the HMS Servan and HMS Tamar will conduct maritime security patrols. Both warships are armed with cannons designed to protect against fast-moving attack crafts and 2 on-deck machine guns. In a call with Jersey Chief Minister Jean Le Fondre, Prime Minister Boris Johnson pledged his unwavering support for the island. He added that any blockade by French boats would be completely unjustified. Israeli troops have shot dead a 16-year-old Palestinian boy during clashes in the occupied West Bank's Nablus city. Syria says Israel has carried out another airstrike on the southern governorate of Quneitra. The Syrian state media said the missile was launched after midnight on the Jubata al-Khashab town. It said no damage has been reported in the Israeli aggression. The attack comes a day after the Syrian army said its air defenses downed several Israeli missiles on the port city of Latakia. Russia says a U.S. presence in Syria is illegal. Moscow's statement comes in response to Pentagon's report that accused Russia of violating the deconfliction process in Syria. In a tweet, the Russian embassy in Washington said the U.S. does not have any right to criticize the Russian armed forces. It said Russian forces operate in Syria on the invitation of Damascus. Earlier in its report, Pentagon said Russia seeks to increase its influence in Syria. In London, the foreign ministers of the world's 7 richest countries concluded their meeting with strong criticism of Russia and China. In their communique, the G7 foreign ministers voiced concerns over Russian aggression against Ukraine and expressed support for Kiev. They urged Russia to investigate and credibly explain what they called the use of a chemical weapon on its soil without further delay. They said G7 would bolster collective efforts to counter Russian disinformation and stop China's coercive economic policies. They accused China of human rights violations, but they held the door open for future cooperation with Beijing to promote global peace and security. The group also urged North Korea to denuclearize and rejoin the Non-Proliferation Treaty. They vowed to strengthen open societies, shared values, and a rules-based international order. The G7 ministers underscored the need to collectively tackle global challenges, including COVID-19 and climate change. Yemen's Prime Minister Ma'in Abdul Malik Said has announced to intensify the military support to army and tribesmen against Houthis. Said visited the battleground city of Marib in a show of strength against the rebels. In a meeting with senior military officials, Saeed said government wants an agreement to create a strong division between Yemen and Iran. Referring to the government advances, he said history is in the making in Marib, while the whole Yemen is ready to follow it. Meanwhile, Marib's governor Sultan al-Arada said the fight in the region has triggered huge displacement. Earlier, Houthis also announced that their negotiations with Saudi-led Arab coalition have failed in Oman. Iraq says the country has hosted more than one round of talks between regional foes Iran and Saudi Arabia. President Bahram Salih made the remarks during an interview with a Lebanon-based think tank. He said the first round of talks took place early last month and described the discussions as significant. This is the first time that Iraq has publicly confirmed that the talks occurred. Pakistan has sent condolences over the demise of Kashmiri leader Ashraf Sehrai in the Indian custody. The pro-freedom leader passed away 1 year after being detained under the draconian Public Safety Act. In a tweet, Prime Minister Imran Khan termed the prolonged detention of Ashraf by Indian forces as illegal. He said that New Delhi's oppression of Kashmiris is a bolt on the conscience of the international community. The Prime Minister said Pakistan would continue to support Kashmiris and their UN mandate right to self-determination. In Colombia, thousands of people have hit the streets of the capital, Bogota, for the 8th straight day. Official data shows 24 people have been killed so far, with over 800 injured since the start of the protests. Clashes broke out between the protesters and riot police, who used tear gas to disperse the crowds. In a video, President Ivan Duque repeated government allegations that drug trafficking mafias were behind the vandalism. He said more than 550 people have been arrested. The protesters torched police stations, vandalized bus shelters and banks, and smoldered tires. In Nigeria, kidnappers have released the remaining 29 students abducted from a college in March. Gunmen had kidnapped 39 students but later released 10 of them. The newly released students arrived at police headquarters in the Kaduna city on Wednesday night. They looked weak, forlorn, and wore dirty, torn clothes. More than 700 people have been abducted from schools in northwest Nigeria since December in a rash of kidnappings for ransom. In Ethiopia, the head of Tigray's regional government, Mulu Niga, has resigned. He was appointed head of the interim administration in November during a military offensive. Fighting erupted in the restive region after the Tigray People's Liberation Front attacked army bases. It is believed that thousands of people have been killed in the conflict, with more than 1 million displaced. It's now time for a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. The EU's chief negotiator for Brexit, Michel Barnier, is set to publish his tell-all book today. In the book, The Grand Illusion, A Secret Diary of Brexit, Barnier mostly reveals his criticism in hints. He writes of leaked information, secretive meetings organized within 15 minutes' notice, and surprise phone calls from the other side. Barnier compliments former British Prime Minister Theresa May as a courageous and tenacious woman. Barnier says his EU team was forced to take it apart step by step to the point of exhaustion. He also hinted at his possible candidacy in the book to return as the French president in the 2022 elections. 10 Belarusians have sued President Alexander Lukashenko in Germany over the crackdown on protests. Their lawyers cited universal laws that allow Germany to try crimes against humanities committed elsewhere. They said that all clients had reported fake arrests, torture, and abuse during imprisonment. Meanwhile, exiled Belarusian opposition leader Svetlana Tishakovskaya welcomed the legal filing. Earlier in March, the UN agreed to set up a team of investigators to probe the alleged use of force by authorities in Belarus. Lukashenko has faced street protests since a presidential election last August that the opposition says was rigged. Germany says it will strengthen the 2030 climate goal and aim for a 65% cut in carbon emissions. This will mean a further reduction by 25 percentage points in the 2020s, 23 points in the 2030s, and 12 in the 2040s. In a news briefing, Finance Minister Olaf Scholz said Berlin will also aim for nearly net zero emissions by 2045. He added that Germany's carbon dioxide levels are already 40% below the 1990 level. Scholz said that required change in legislation will go to the cabinet for formal approval next week. The UN says food insecurity in the poorest countries reached record highs in 2020, with millions at risk of famine. In a report, the global body said some 155 million people across 55 countries were classified as being in crisis. It said that 28 million people were close to famine, adding the situation could deteriorate in weeks. The report cited conflict, COVID-19 fallout, and climate change as the main factors for food insecurity. It called on the international community to ramp up its humanitarian response to the countries outlined in the report. Vietnam is one of the most vulnerable countries to climate change. Seawater intrusion in the normally fertile lands has forced many rice farmers to abandon the grain in favor of small shrimp ponds. This report has all the details. For years, a Vietnamese farmer toiled on a sliver of land sandwiched between the Mekong River and the South China Sea, a region widely known as Vietnam's Rice Bowl, to grow the prized grain. Now, thanks to climate change, Tha Thuy Than Tho has, like many other farmers in the region, swapped grains for prawns and taken advantage of devastating salination to farm shrimp about a decade ago. Every day, workers get up to tend to the shrimps in the vast farmland of the pond in the southern Sok Trang province. They feed them 3 times a day, measure the salt and pH level to maintain water condition in the shrimp cultivation.
Before, when we planted rice, we were all very poor because the crops did not yield much profit. The rice was submerged in salt water that also had a very high pH level, this whole rice field. So we had no money and were very poor. But now, since we converted the field to raise shrimps, we are doing much better. Some of us even have money to save in the banks and build nice houses.
With the salination becoming more devastating, the shrimp farmers are not sure how long they can enjoy their lucrative business. The area has started facing a freshwater shortage over the past 2-3 years, and the situation is getting worse. Experts say one of the reasons is the construction of several hydropower dams upstream of the Mekong River.
In the areas where farmers dug to make ponds for shrimps, they literally got rid of the uppermost layer of soil with all the nutrients. Therefore, after shrimp farms, these places will become a desert with nothing left. Nothing can grow, not even grass. That is the cost to pay.
Vietnam has been ranked among the 5 countries likely to be most affected by climate change, with rising seawater levels and salination, particularly in the Mekong Delta region. According to the World Bank, climate change will reduce national income up to by 3.3% by 2050. Blue Origin billionaire Jeff Bezos' space company is targeting July 20 for its first suborbital sightseeing trip. This is a landmark moment in the competition to usher a new era of private commercial space travel. More in this report. The New Shepard rocket and capsule combo is designed to autonomously fly 6 passengers more than 100 kilometers above Earth into suborbital space. The height is enough to experience a few minutes of weightlessness. The capsule features 6 observation windows that are nearly 3 times as tall as those on a Boeing 747 jetliner. The vehicle also has an escape mechanism in case of an emergency when it is being carried up by its booster. Blue Origin says it will offer 1 seat on the first flight to the winning bidder of an online auction. The proceeds will be donated to the space firm's foundation. Celebrities and the uber-rich seem to be the core market for the company's planned space trip. SpaceX has successfully launched and landed its latest Starship prototype, the SN-15. The high-altitude test flight was carried out from Boca Chica, Texas. The Starship is a test model heavy-lift rocket developed to carry humans and 100 tons of cargo on future missions to Moon and Mars. The rocket is the company's next-generation fully reusable launch vehicle. It lies at the center of billionaire entrepreneur Elon Musk's ambition to make human space travel more affordable and routine. Earlier, similar test flights of the Starship models SN-9 and SN-10 failed and ended with fiery explosions. In a spectacular display of colorful polka dots, Japanese artist Yayao Kusuma has brought her signature motif to the New York Botanical Garden. Details in this report. Dots are everywhere, on buildings, trees, water, and more at the Kusuma Cosmic Nature exhibition. The steel floral installations, painted in multi-colored vibrant hues and covered in polka dots, are overwhelming the visitors. The show features 60 artworks by the 92-year-old avant-garde artist.
We are at the New York Botanical Garden. We are super excited. Our summer show this year is Kusama Cosmic Nature and features the artwork of Yayoi Kusama. She has a long history of connecting with the natural world through her artwork, and she grew up on a seed nursery north of Tokyo, and as a young girl romped through flower fields with violas and pumpkins, and started drawing pretty early in her career.
The rain could not keep patrons away as the exhibition has opened after a year's delay due to the pandemic. In the summer, visitors can enter Kusuma's infinity mirrored room illusion inside the heart at the garden.
It's pretty surreal. You know, we've been working with the artist in her studio since 2017, and we were so ready to mount this show last year. We had started receiving artwork, and you know, it became pretty clear that it wasn't going to happen, you know, around Christmas time of last year. So we're thrilled.
Kusuma left Japan for New York when she was 27 years old. Here, she made a name for herself by painting motifs inspired by hallucinations of flashing lights, dots, and flowers she had seen since her childhood. Stocks in the Asia-Pacific are trading mixed, echoing overnight Wall Street sentiments. Investors are practicing cautious optimism about upcoming company earning reports. Japan's Nikkei 225 has jumped nearly 2%, with the TOPIX index also ascending over 1.5%. Seoul's Kospi gained close to 1%, while Hong Kong's Hang Seng index added over 0.5%. Mainland Chinese shares managed to edge up fractionally after a bumpy start. However, the ASX 200 in Australia has shed over 0.5%. Sudan says it signed an agreement to clear errors to the African Development Bank through a $425 million bridge loan. It has been provided by Britain, Sweden, and Ireland. The agreement opens up Sudan to new funding, including an immediate grant of $207 million. In a statement, the ADB praised the aggressive economic reforms enacted by the Sudanese government. The payment of the errors is Sudan's latest step to clear at least $50 billion in debt. Sudan was previously able to clear its errors to the World Bank through a bridge loan by the United States. It's now time to take a look at the weather updates from around the world. For the latest news updates, you can follow us on our social media at indus.news.